the most serious problem is what you call the mid-career teachers, 5 to 20 years, and what some might call the compression of the pay scale for those that has happened over the years. What is your solution for that? And by that I mean, are you suggesting more steps, bigger jumps in the steps, or something else?
It's an easy solution. We have to move steps to years. So basically what would happen is that right now a teacher, let's say, has been teaching for 10 years. They do not know what they're going to be making in another 10 years. But if you move it from steps to years, they'll know exactly what they'll be on the pay scale. So, you know, if you were to look and see that in, say, I'm at 10 and when I'm at 20, I'll be at the top of the pay scale, they're going to think about, I can buy a house. I can start thinking about what I'm going to be able to afford, and they're going to choose to stay here. Also, when it comes to negotiation, so say, for example, when it came to the last contract, we had to bargain a percent increase, a step, a percent increase, and a step. If we were a mainland district, competitive district, we would have just been negotiating the salary increases. And the two steps would not have even been there because that's just anticipated that you're going to move up on that one. And that's how we get caught up, is that we need to be able to negotiate just pay increases rather than the steps to years. So it's not that expensive to fix.
That actually gets to my next question, is if you made that fundamental change, tying steps to years, and I realize there's other issues in terms of compensation, hard to staff, that need to be addressed separately.
Yes.
But that one alone, approximately what is the dollar cost of that from your estimates?
If we were to do something to that, we've looked at it, we believe it would be something in the range of $50 to $60 million. What it would impact is about, it would actually only impact about 5,000 teachers. Again, because we have that huge gap at the mid-level teachers, that 5,000 teacher gap. But what it would mean is, okay, so imagine a young teacher, you've been teaching for 8 years, and you're thinking about having a family and having kids. And you're looking at it and you don't know what you'll be making in the future. If they can know that, again, that they'll be making that in the future, they might stay. So we're not far behind the mainland in the beginning salary. It's that, and you mentioned it, Bruce, it's that huge compression that we have in the middle. And what we've seen is from our research that we have this about 15-year gap where people could probably move up just 1 or 2 steps. And that's really the major fundamental flaw that we have in teacher compensation in Hawaii.
Is there a process within your current collective bargaining agreement that allows a mechanism for teachers to move up steps within the contract period rather than it being negotiated?
Well, anything can be negotiated, okay? I mean, if it's something that we both want to agree upon, and this is what I hope for. Right now, it's basically on the 21 hours and the health care. But I think that we realize that we have, look, I think the one thing that happened from the constitutional amendment is everyone in Hawaii is talking about education, how we have to improve it. And I think that we've seen from the crisis that we have right now that, you know, it's something that needs to be done immediately and not wait until the contract expires in 2 years. This is a crisis right now. And how many years do we have to wait before we're going to fix it? So the process is, at any point, both sides can agree to fix it, and if we both decide to agree to fix it, we can work on solutions to fixing our teacher shortage crisis.
Has that negotiated provision been utilized by the membership, and do you have statistics of how much people have increased through the PD credits?
Do we have how many people have moved up by PD credits? No, we don't have that data.
Provision that allows.
Yeah, we don't have that data.
Okay. Thank you.
I guess, Corey, I'm all for teachers having an increase in pay. I guess I just have a problem with saying that you can just simply get higher pay and spend 20 years with the same kind of training that you had from when you first graduated. So to just say years of service is what you're going to get paid, whether you take any courses or do any PD or anything. I guess I just have a problem with that, because I would expect that we want teachers to get better over time, and we want all of us to get better over time. And I don't think you can do that if you don't have any new ideas. So when you're talking about that, then the PD needs to be in there somewhere.
And so let me just make sure that I explain this too, is that, yes, this does not just, we would not change that. All of the competitive districts have the two parts. You have the years of service, and then if you notice on it, the master's part, if you look at the other part where it says bachelor's plus 60 or master's plus 30, that's the other part where they're continuing their education to grow. And so, of course, that still would be, I mean, that's the same structure that's basically done everywhere, and that's something that why we're able to compare it, is that you do go up on the salary schedule. The more education you get, the more PD you get, and that's something that we still can continue to encourage.
Right, and that's, I totally in agreement with that.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Any more questions?
Corey, you know, when I look at the teacher separation counts by reason, I would ask you to go back and re-examine it from the standpoint of this. If I include the other personal no reason, leaving teaching profession, dissatisfied with workplace environment, to me, those are all teachers who left the profession but stayed in Hawaii. And if you add those three categories up, it's more than the amount that left the state. So, and I don't know the reason. I don't know if pay would have been made a difference or not. And so I think that's what I would be curious about. I don't disagree with doing the steps, but I don't know if we're solving only part of the problem versus all of the problem.
No, that's a really good observation, and let me point out to you, increasing teacher pay is not just to give more money to teachers. What it's really, the biggest thing is this: you want to create a surplus. So let's take, for example, some things that teacher dissatisfaction, and just take special education as the key component. By far, if you were to say to my special education teachers, what would you like, higher pay or a lower caseload? I think a lot of my SPED teachers right now would choose a lower caseload because they're completely stressed. But the problem is there's no way to lower their caseload unless we have a lot more special education teachers. And so in order to do that, we need to be able to be literally having people that want to becoming SPED teachers and keeping our SPED teachers. And that was why when pay comes in. And I would hope that once we have a surplus, I do actually believe that that 500 shortage is actually, we have a bigger problem than even that. Because when we looked at it in 2009, we actually had a lower teacher to student ratio than we do now. If we were to do the same ratio that we have currently, we would need to add on another 200 to 300 positions. And I also believe that some principals, if they actually had a surplus, would be using part of the weighted student formula to actually buy SPED positions. But because there's no one to hire, they're not using that funding to do it. So it's not just to pay our teachers better, it's to create the incentive to stay and to increase more people to go into the SPED profession. And so on the presentation today, one of the things that we really do support, the tech committee is good, the SPED recruiter is good. I know that Dr. Kishimoto is doing the salary study. Those things are good. I think that it's not all the solutions that the DOE is putting up for. A lot of them are good solutions, but I do think that we have to look at the overall problem.
Any other questions? Well, I appreciate your presentation, Corey. I do want to comment that when the Student Achievement Committee was doing the presentations from the various complexes regarding special education, one of the things I continue to ask is the lack of special education teachers within their respective schools, and the fact that you had teachers who did not have any special education background per se teaching special education. And then I remarked at several of the meetings that the last strategic plan, the board amended the strategic plan to indicate that schools should have the best teachers teaching the most vulnerable students. And then I became aware that just saying that doesn't really make it happen, that there are challenges within the schools, and then there's also the reality of collective bargaining and the teachers' rights to work with their principal, and the fact that the board is not going to impose upon schools what exactly they're going to do with who's going to teach what. But, but the reality was that there was a myriad of complexity in regards to how things are done at the school level and in the classroom. And then there's a recognition that you have all these vacancies in special education, and we've talked about that as well. And one of the things I asked you the last time we had this conversation about 3 or so months ago was whether HSTA would support an effort, at least a pilot project, with the idea of paying special education teachers more. Because we need to do something different. We cannot really wait till the next collective bargaining negotiation. Because if we did try to see if more pay will attract and retain special education teachers, then that would be part of the evidence in helping our most vulnerable students. And you know, I thought you indicated your willingness to try that. Well, maybe I'm putting words in your mouth, but I would like to hear your comments on that, because if that's something that you're open-minded to, then, you know, we'll continue to push the superintendent in that direction, which he's already articulated a priority.
So let me take the first part of that first. And I've heard you say this many times, that our best teachers should go to where our highest needs are. And I look at the highest needs, not just as special education is important, but also to looking at some of our most vulnerable areas, which is our high poverty rural areas. And so right now we have about a $3,000 bonus to do that. And unfortunately, that has not been a driving factor to getting teachers to drive the distance. I mean, basically, that's what teachers call less than gas money. So yeah, I think that we have proposed, and we'd be open to the idea that if teachers were willing to work in our hardest to staff areas, that's a very common practice, that would be increased to encourage teachers to do that. I think that we have proposed, and we would be open to looking at how we compensate our special education teachers in order to recruit and retain. The hardest part for us as an organization is that it used to be, and I was shocked by this, is that it used to be that elementary education positions, that was always a surplus, and it was very competitive to get into there. And now we've run into a shortage in even elementary education. And I think that the highest fills that they have to do each year is in elementary education. So I think that this would be something that we'd be willing to have a conversation about. I think that we have to do something. And I think that the special education crisis that we have is horrible, the hardest staff is horrible, and there's got to be something that we do to try to solve it.
Okay, I take that as an agreement. Yeah, Superintendent.
Thank you. I was going to wait till later when we had the item discussion, but I think just to go with the flow of this discussion, I do want to just say a few comments. One is I appreciate Corey Rosenlee coming on behalf of HSTA and keeping this conversation going. The conversation is not happening just here. So I do want to share for the public's knowledge that we are talking offline, because we are mutually committed to addressing what is a very difficult situation in Hawaii. When we have a shortage, we don't have contiguous states to look at how we recruit. When the mainland has a shortage, they have contiguous states that they either partner with or they compete against. I am just coming back from a meeting and a convening of the chief state officers, so all the state superintendents, the 50 superintendents across the nation, got together. So I just landed just last night, and one of the conversations we got together around are policy agendas around the teacher shortage that we are all struggling with. And so it's exacerbated even further when we talk about just the location of Hawaii. And so our conversation was about how do we change the conversation to really start pushing on our thinking to think differently about this. So yes, I think there's a short term and there's a long term that we have to talk about. In the short term, how do we look at our existing pay structure and invest in that? In the long term, how do we look at multiple perspectives of how we might restructure how we do pay. There are different ways of doing pay beyond just looking at a step structure, which we've traditionally used in education, just like there is the conversation on the table about whether we pay our special education teachers on a different pay schedule. So all of those things have to be open. I think the other piece that I want to emphasize is that whether it's TFA or Troops to Teachers, all of our partners have to be at the table. Because from my perspective, the reason we partner with TFA or our former military is not for the purpose of mitigating this challenge. The purpose we partner with them is to bring other thought leaders to the table and to diversify our workforce, which we need to continue to do. So I think everyone has a voice at this table. We need bold action together. I asked Corey to keep pushing on this because I think that as an organization head, he represents a large body of educators and can have a powerful impact to move this agenda in this state. But we will do this all together. This is both a recruitment and retention issue. On the recruitment side, our pipeline is absolutely leaking. On the retention side, we have to have more reasons to strengthen the teacher profession, which is needs to be treated as a highly respected profession. I think when you talk to anyone in the public, they will say, absolutely, we support our teachers. When you look at our policy agenda, it's not bold enough to show that we're supporting our teachers. So I think collectively we're at the same table. And so I look forward to the continuing work that we need to do together, and I also look forward to really enlarging our perspective around different ways to mitigate both recruitment and retention.
Thank you, Superintendent. I think that summarized the issue and the position, and with that, we'll thank you for your testimony, Kari.